Cashflow Diary podcast, episode 463.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Cashflow Diary podcast, the podcast that teaches you insider tips, tactics, and strategies for creating leverage streams of cash flow into your life. Learn from top-performing entrepreneurs, business owners, investors, and thought leaders from across the globe as they share their secrets to success. Like what you learn on this and other Cashflow Diary podcast episodes? Go to learninvestingnow.com and sign up to receive powerful tips and information that will help you succeed as an entrepreneur and investor. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, educator, speaker, author, and master facilitator of Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow game, Jay Massey.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Cashflow Diary podcast. I'm your host, Jay Massey, and I'm glad that you are here today because here's the thing. When you are going out there, you are looking to build cash flow, right? You want to be bigger, better, badder, become a better entrepreneur. And you are out there doing everything you can to rope and tangle every sale you can to make your company grow. Well, there's another thing that we should be concerned about as entrepreneurs. We should be concerned about, honestly, that bottom line, not just how much money comes in, but how much money is going out. Meaning you got to play offense as well as defense on this money game. And you got to make sure that the expenses are in line, and you got to do whatever you can to leverage every opportunity that's available to you so that you can compete and be the fiercest and make sure that that bottom line grows the fattest. What does that mean, ladies and gentlemen? It means we need to manage those expenses deeply. And one of the biggest expenses that we all have is, well, taxes. You just don't think about it. But today, before you tune out, we're not going to be talking about taxes. We're going to be talking about making sure that all of the things that you do have available to you as an entrepreneur come your way. All of the benefits that you can take advantage of absolutely accrue to you. I have with me today none other than Neil Evans. He has the unique profession of a cost recovery consultant. Let me put that in another words. We're going to find money that you are already spending and make sure it comes back to you. Now I got your attention, don't I? That is his business, and I find it interesting because his job is to literally to find hidden money for U.S. businesses in the form of specialized tax incentives and cost recovery programs. And here's the fun part. They work on a contingency basis. Now I know I really have your attention. What we're going to do is we're going to dig in. We're going to make sure that you have those notepads, those pens, those iPads, or whatever you'd like to use to make notes. But if you have been thinking to yourself, oh my goodness, my company makes a lot of money, but we also spend a lot of money. What can I do to battle that? Then you're going to want to pay attention to Neil Evans. Neil, you there?
I am, Jay.
Glad that you're here, sir. Thanks for taking the time to be here. Now, you have a very unique profession. I haven't seen a lot of cost recovery consultants out there in the marketplace, but I would venture to say you are sorely needed in so many different places. Wouldn't you agree?
It is an interesting profession, and it's a great way to help businesses. Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Now, today being the first time that you're here, I need to ask you the same question I tend to ask everybody else the first time that they're here. Are you ready?
I am.
All right. I tend to look at today's entrepreneurs a lot like yesterday's superheroes. You know, Batman, Robin, Wonder Woman, etc. Because I think entrepreneurs and superheroes have a ton of things in common. Chief among them is the fact that, well, occasionally as an entrepreneur, I can envision myself as saving our customers with our products and services. And who knows, maybe I have a cape on or not. But also, like a superhero, an entrepreneur has a beginning. And if you think about it, there was a time, say, with Spider-Man, where all he was doing was just taking photos, trying to go to school, do his thing. And then one day something unique happens to them and he decides and discovers that, oh my goodness, I have a special ability. And he has to choose whether he's going to use it for good or evil. So my question to you is as follows. Before the cost recovery, before helping companies find over more than $500 million, you know, before college, before everything, and yes, even before the Brooklyn Dodgers and your love affair with them, what we want to know is, who is Neil Evans?
Wow, that's a deep question. My dad was an entrepreneur,
Hmm.
Jay. He was a restaurant owner, and he worked really, really, really hard. That's a tough profession, as you probably
Hmm.
know, if you know any restaurant owners, which I'm sure you do.
I know more
And
former restaurant
yeah,
owners than restaurant owners, but yes.
yeah, for sure. But when I was a little kid, I mean, really a little kid, like 3 and 4 years old, he owned a bar in Manhattan. It was a jazz bar. And he would give mom Saturdays off and take me into work with him. Here I am, 3 or 4 years old. And he had downstairs in his bar what was the remains of a speakeasy from the 1930s, and that was his office. And I'd go down there, and I was, pretty precocious. I'd be rolling quarters down there, and doing all those kinds of things that as 3 and 4 5-year-old kid. But I got to see how hard he worked, and we'd spend Saturday together. And then when the jazz band came, I'd sit in the corner of the bar and listen, and it was an amazing time of my life that also kind of nurtured my creativity. And then I'd fall asleep, and one of the waitresses would take me downstairs to the speakeasy and put me to sleep on the couch. And then 3, 4 in the morning, Dad would take me home. But during the week, we didn't see him till late hours. And I kind of, it always got ingrained in me how hard people work for their money. We were not a wealthy family at all, regardless of the bar and the restaurant. And as I grew up, money just became more important to me, not just for the material goodies, but because it's part of Maslow's triangle, right? Or not Maslow, but whatever his name was, the hierarchy.
Yeah.
And you've got to have this before you get to that point. So anyway, that kind of got ingrained in me. And when I finally got into corporate life, I was helping other parts of the company be more productive, because that means that they would be more successful. And finally, back in the early 2000s, I ended up at a company which many people know as Beachbody. And Beachbody is a direct marketing company. They do infomercials. And if you work out, you probably know about them from seeing the TV commercials. And my main role really turned into the person that was responsible for optimizing the money that was spent in the company, trying to find the best possible deals at the minimum level of acceptable quality, which is always a trade-off, right? So you're trying to negotiate shipping rates or cost of goods, whatever, and you don't want to sacrifice quality because they were a very quality-oriented company. So I ended up leaving corporate life in 2010 for a number of reasons, and decided that I really liked the idea of helping preserve cash, and also doing a great job in helping people. And I found this opportunity to join a number of other people in this cost recovery genre of business. There aren't many of us in the United States, but there are a few. And it just feels really, really great to be able to help companies on a contingency basis. You talked about Spider-Man and Batman, all great figures. Well, I kind of liken myself to Santa Claus, really.
Okay.
Yeah, because look, if I come into your business and I find some hidden money, and it might be a whole lot of hidden money, then I feel like Santa Claus. And if I don't find money, I guess we just take the reindeer and head off to another business. But but that's really the love of my life, is to help other businesses survive, because I know how hard it is to do so.
Yeah, no, I get that. I can hear that there's more of a mission behind the message and what you do than just physically, hey, let me help you recover some of that money. It's almost like you can see that maybe now you're helping a dad spend more time with his kids simply because he doesn't have to, maybe not have to work as hard to have some extra time with them, simply because he's not spending as much money, which again makes sense. But I right now I'm wondering if Marvel or DC has ever made a Santa Claus superhero. Oh my goodness. I did not see that coming. So, now in the corporate world, I've heard phrases like good, fast, cheap, choose two, and which typically means is, if you want something fast and cheap, it's not going to be good. If you want something cheap and good, it's not going to be fast. And if you want something good and fast, it's definitely not going to be cheap. And I know for myself as a business owner, I always go for good, and I'm always choosing between fast and cheap. But if I hear you correctly, what you're saying is I could have good, fast, and cheap?
I think so. But let's just put that in perspective too, because the caveat that I mentioned is that you have to set certain boundaries as far as your minimum acceptable level of quality, depending on what you're doing. Um, what I see and my company sees is that there's so much waste and so much unused opportunity in businesses that they're kind of missing this huge boat, which could help them be gooder, faster, and cheaper. And that's my role in my profession, is to extract that money from the sources that bring it forth and present that to the business owners. One thing that I'm very sure about is that money, although the bills are tangible sorts of things, the money is really a representation of what you're going to do with it, And you mentioned about having more time with the family, which, was very, very important to us as kids. I mean, we had a good life, and weekends, sometimes we got to, jump in the car with dad and take a ride or something like that. But the money represents different things for different people. And it might be time, it might be vacation, it might be basic needs. It just all the way up and down the scale. So I always consider the fact that when I help a company retrieve money, it's going someplace that's going to help somebody somehow in a way that's not associated with the instrument itself. And that's really what makes me feel good. The money itself is, nice green stuff, put it in your wallet, et cetera, or write a check. But it's what it represents, which is, to me, very, very important.
Got it. Now, you said two phrases that I want to dig into for a second. You said unused opportunity, and then you also said waste. It sounds like you're making a distinction. The unused opportunity is one thing and waste is something else. Can you elaborate a little bit?
Oh, absolutely. And really, there's more genres of money, at least from my definition, than those two. But waste, let me give you a really down-to-earth example. One of the things that we do is, let's say, for instance, you're a hospital or a restaurant. Excuse me a second. A hospital or restaurant or anybody, maybe a manufacturing company that generates waste. So let's just physically talk about waste. And generally, it's an expensive proposition depending on the type of waste it is. Let's say it's hazardous waste, which would make it much more expensive than, say, cooking oil, which even sometimes gets recycled somehow. But the owner of the business is kind of sort of at the mercy of the waste management company. Now, down here in Southern California, we have a company called Waste Management, so I'm not picking
Right.
on them directly,
Right.
If any waste management people are out there, but I'm just talking about in general. But business owners are kind of at the mercy of those kinds of things because they don't have the wherewithal to be able to determine whether their vendor is treating them fairly. All right. So we have our strategic people that actually are experts in that sort of field, and they can take the waste bills and the tickets and all of the paperwork that's associated with hauling waste, especially hazardous waste, and find out whether the merchant or the vendor is treating the merchant fairly. And what we would do is we would go in and renegotiate the agreement to allow the vendor to make a fair profit, but not usurious. And then, of course, the client will definitely benefit. So we would define that as waste. In other words, you're paying for something that you shouldn't be paying for.
Okay.
In the area.
Whoa. Hold on.
Yeah,
There's
sure.
something is clicking in my head right now.
Okay.
Because there's
sure.
two things. There's one, you use the phrase determine if their vendor is treating them fairly. Are you saying that for some reason, because I'm thinking of this right now, the first use case based upon what you're telling me is an apartment building, because depending on the size of apartment building that I've owned or that someone's owning, we've got to negotiate our trash contract very specifically with the company in terms of pickups and cost and all of those types of things. And are you saying that typically the business owner doesn't have enough insight or enough breadth or experience from seeing so many different vendors to be able to compare proper prices properly? Is that I'm trying to understand.
Right. So I believe everybody has an expertise. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And for, let's say, a business owner to have expertise in the backyard dynamics of waste management would kind of be ludicrous, because it's just, you do well when you're focused. And I know you yourself are one of the most focused guys I've ever met. So you'd really appreciate this. It's that you cannot be an expert in everything that there is to know in the world. It just is impossible. And I would say that for anybody, whether you're a hospital or whatever, dealing with the dynamics of how many pounds went to the dump and was it the right material and did you get charged too much hazardous waste as opposed to non-hazardous waste is something that a business owner should never, ever, ever have to do. And there's a very high likelihood that they may be overpaying because of incorrect accounting by the vendor or just a usurious profit of some kind. And a usurious profit does not have to be like, I should be paying $500 and I'm paying $1,000 per pound or per unit or per load. It might be just a couple percent, but that adds up over time. To give you an example, I dealt with a chain of restaurants on a different product, which is credit card auditing. And we go in and we look at the merchant statements, just the way we look at the way bills and the waste management, and we determine whether the processor is treating the merchant fairly. So in our definition of fairly, we would look to see if that merchant processor and the bank, which is underneath it, are set up correctly and also are charging a fair amount of profit. And so when you look at volume, it may be that it's really only a small percentage more than they should be charging. But when you have large volume, it adds up to a tremendous amount of money. And give an example, with this local group of small group of restaurants, they were not in a usurious situation. They were in a situation where we felt they were being overcharged. We renegotiated their agreement, and just on credit card fees alone, we found more than $70,000 a year that we renegotiated. So we split that. That's the way we work. And obviously the client was really quite happy because they didn't have to change processor. They didn't have to change their systems and their POS and all that kind of thing. And we were able to just renegotiate the contract. And then we kept an eye on it for a few years, checking the statements every month, making sure they were consistent. But that's what I mean by that.
Okay, I've got so many questions right now. Okay. So when I own a building, and something I've taught, for a long time, what you do is, one of the most mismanaged expenses is property taxes. And
Right.
we have this habit of consistently contesting them to make sure that that the city governments, charge us in a fair manner, for what they think the properties are worth. And that's one expense that we can actively manage as landlords.
Right.
It sounds like you do something like that, but when I'm listening to you talk, I'm like, this could expand to every expense line item. I mean, because every one of our expense line items is another vendor providing a service to the company, ultimately helping us provide our product or service to the consumer. Hello there, entrepreneur. This is Jay Massey. I know that if you've ever gone over to the site, cashflowdiary.com, you may have asked yourself, where on earth do you get a domain name from? Especially as you are beginning to build your bigger, better, badder business, you need a web presence. You need the email address. You need a way for people to contact you electronically so that you can stop doing the @gmail.com game. Well, the good folks over at GoDaddy have definitely supplied us with every domain that we have ever used. So what I want you to do is I want you to go over to trygodaddy.com/cashflow diary. Again, that's trygodaddy.com/cashflow diary, because it's a quick way for you to get set up to capture your domain name the exact way that you want it. They got easy search functions, and most importantly for you is that you'll be up and running today. As I said, once you get started, stay started. Don't let small little obstacles of how to get your own domain name going stop you. So again, go to trygodaddy.com/cashflow diary, and let's get back to the rest of the story.
Right. So, as a matter of fact, speaking about property tax, whenever we take on a client for, and we'll get into this talking about the opportunity side of the money, but whenever we take on a client on our tax side of our business, we always do the property tax audits for free. Now, if we find money, we're going to split it. But we're just so experienced at doing the comps, and it's a gift actually for the company. So we can take that load off a business owner as well, because the business owner, especially a building owner, needs to concentrate on filling that building and making sure the building's in good repair and all of the things. And when they have a trusted partner that's watching out for them, they can push that off their plate and maybe take a look at it once in a while, but that's what we do as a company.
Well, I mean, you may not know this, but I know I've spent countless hours every time we go to a new marketplace, like researching because I historically have done this through CPAs, and finding there's usually a CPA in every marketplace that's specialized in this one little thing, and finding him or her who's the expert in that particular market always takes forever.
Right.
But, knowing that, I think everybody will find at least a use there. Now, there's something else that I was thinking about, when it comes to, because you started mentioning hazardous materials. I know that, when we're doing a rehab, of any particular size, again, we've, depending on the age of the original construction, we've got to deal with asbestos and other cleanup issues. Are we also talking about stuff in that area too?
No, that's quite honestly, that's a little bit different, Jay. That's very, very specialized, because generally that's a one-off. We're talking about the day-to-day, month-to-month, year-to-year normal activity from your building, your business, the restaurant, the hospital, et cetera. Those kinds of things like asbestos remediation really, really takes specialists that just work on that and can give you the correct documentation to keep you from any sort of future liability. And that's not what we would do, but most certainly we'd always recommend, just from prudence, that you never tackle something like that yourself. You make sure that you have people that are certified to do that sort of work.
Got it. So when it comes down to it, it sounds like a lot of what we would consider the ongoing operational expenses is where you guys specialize and can help us.
That's actually a small part of it, believe it or not.
Okay.
It's a small
I'm,
part of
I'm,
it.
I'm all ears.
All right, so let's get to opportunity side of the equation. That really
Okay.
is a bit more my heartthrob because that's where the big money lies. Although credit card often, produces really great savings as it did for this restaurant group here, but on the opportunity side, and the tax part of the opportunity side, because we have a number of opportunity sides. On the tax side, and I know you're aware of this as we've chatted in the past, but building owners really, really need to take advantage of what's known as cost segregation studies. And cost segregation studies are an IRS, actually a Treasury Department recommendation for people who own commercial property, which apartment buildings most certainly are, to allow them some cash flow in the early years that they wouldn't normally have and to offset federal taxes, defray them. And essentially, what it does is it allows you to accelerate a percentage of the straight line depreciation that you would normally experience in a private residence. The depreciation or a rental unit might be 29 and a half years. For commercial, it's 39 and a half years. But we generally are able to pull a minimum of 20%, if not all the way up to 45% of the 39 and a half year life of a building into the first 3 or 5 years. And if you just sit there and do some calculation on a building that might cost $2 million, the client is writing off about $50,000 a year in depreciation. But if we pull a quarter of that out, which might be $500,000, and sprinkle that over the first 5 years, just as a little example, they're writing off an additional $100,000 a year. And in bonus depreciation years, they might be able to write off that whole $500,000 in 1 year, depending on the economic climate. But the Treasury Department actually recommends this for business owners. It changes the accounting system a little bit for business. As a matter of fact, I have quite a number of hotel management clients. They all have multiple hotels, and they love this because there's a time value to that money. So if you did nothing with it except invest it, you could look at the return on that money and say, wow, it's making money instead of just, I don't want my money 40 years from now. I want it right now. So that is a great, great, great vehicle. And it also allows the building owner to utilize that cash to instead of paying taxes, to pour that money back into their building, maybe to make improvements in the building, make it more attractive for all your Cashflow Diary folks to raise their occupancy rate. So, as I said earlier, everybody has a different need for that cash, but businesses very often are looking for ways to maybe hire a key employee, like a manager that's very tenured and has great expertise, or purchase some needed equipment, or do some further renovation on their building. So there's all manners of use for that money for sure. So that is a great, great, great tax incentive. And by the way, it's one that unless you're with a really large CPA firm, you should have that done by specialists, such as a company like ours that uses engineers to do it, as it is an engineering study per the IRS.
Yeah. Totally understood. Now, would this be something that you guys would recommend that we do on purchase? I close today, tomorrow start the study, or at what point in the ownership process have you guys found that it makes the most sense?
Well, the very best, because you haven't used any of the depreciation yet, and you want to gain as much as you can of the accelerated depreciation, obviously, is when you first purchase the building. Presumably, you purchase a building, and then you're going to do renovations. And those renovations, a good portion of those renovations are also put into 39 and a half year life. So you can kind of just throw that into the basis of the building. But in fact, we can do cost segregation studies if you've owned a building, we would say no longer than 20 years. 10
Okay.
years is kind of 10 years is kind of a good upper marker because you've only burned a quarter of the depreciation. But if you've got $1 million left on the book, $1 million is $1 million. So we can,
This is
we
true.
can, yeah. So if we take 25% of that out, or 20, or 40, or whatever that is, you're still pushing that depreciation into now. And if now is the time that you need money, maybe your brother offered you an 8% annuity that you want to throw a whole bunch of money in. People have different reasons for needing the money, but the money is there.
Well, I think it's more that you're giving us control over where the money goes, because again, taxes, as has been mentioned more than once, is by far one of the greatest expenses that you can feel helpless to control, combat, or deal with. And one of the things that I know personally I like about real estate is that we become masters of our AGI, whenever we need to. And at the end of the day, this is another a very great tool. Now, let's talk a moment about the non-real estate ways or the non-real estate businesses that you can help, because I know we have a number of people who are in there. They're like, yeah, they're trying to get to the point to where they own real estate. They've got their business now. What are some of the areas that they could probably find some opportunity?
Okay, so of course, the cost segregation applies to anyone who owns commercial property. Generally, if the basis is more than $1 million, but there are so many other opportunities. For instance, the credit card audit is really, really a great way to find out if you're leaking some money. There's actually a
Did you say
program.
leaking?
Leaking money. I
That's
call that
funny.
leaking money.
Yeah. Okay.
But there's even a program since 2013, because of the largest class action lawsuit in U.S. history, the Visa MasterCard lawsuit, that will actually allow businesses to pass on the cost of merchant processing to the buyer. The premise of that was that the history of in short, was that Visa, MasterCard, all the credit card companies were advertising the rewards cards, use the reward cards, but they weren't paying for the pleasure of that. It was the merchant themselves that were actually paying higher fees for reward cards than non-reward cards. So there was a class action settlement against Visa, MasterCard, largest in U.S. history. I think it was at $7.2 billion back then. Then it was reduced down to 6.7. Now it's being debated through the courts, et cetera. But one of the offshoots was that merchants could pass along the cost of processing to a certain extent. I think it was up to 4.5% to their clients. Now, that does not work in a competitive environment. Obviously, the donut shop probably isn't going to charge you a 4% fee on your donuts, because it would be all over Yelp and everybody would be going across the street to the other donut shop.
Right.
So that's going to work. But if you're, let's say you're a DUI attorney, or you have a funeral home, or you have another non-competitive business, for instance, in-home health care. We have colleagues that are involved in in-home health care. I have a client that has a maid service, and people really don't shop those kinds of things, and they wouldn't mind paying that couple extra percent to to engage somebody that they really like and trust. I mean, if somebody's going to come to my house and I'm going to give them the keys to my house so that I'm not there most of the time, they're there, I don't care that they charge me 3.5%. So there's one opportunity. It may be small depending on the types of businesses that your folks are involved with. If we go onto the large scale, there is a product called virtual payments And that's about an 11-year-old technology, but essentially allows you to get paid for paying your bills. And it's based upon the fact that you may have vendors that accept credit cards, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, and what happens is you convert them to taking credit cards from you. So let's pick a building owner or any business owner that spends a lot of money on their accounts payable. So you pay with this virtual credit card, which is not a piece of plastic. It's a what's known as a ghost account. The credit card number is never the same twice. Although I suppose in the year 2060 it probably will come back around. But it's paid. And it's very, very secure. But the client actually gets a rebate on that payment to their vendor, because their vendor is allowing the client to use the virtual credit card, and it's just like a
Mm-hmm.
Visa or Mastercard. And the relationship is between the vendor, the bank, and then us. And the bank, the issuing bank, and the actual bank itself will allow most of that money to kind of float back to the client. So to give you an idea, for every $10 million of AP spend, excluding wages, of course, a merchant can expect to get $150,000 back. So, we're talking about larger companies, of course, but, there's no telling where the cash flow diary folks are, what part of their life they're coming from. Is it big business? Is it something else that they're trying to augment their income, get residual income for the rest of their lives so they can quit their, whatever they're doing. So that's an example of a very, very, very lucrative product. And of course, there are others, tax incentives such as the research and development tax credit, which is so poorly named because it actually applies to anyone who does technical work or manufacturing.
Hmm.
And if your folks come from any of those areas, architectural, engineering, IT, and manufacturing, and maybe even research and development, that is an awesome, excuse me, that's Matisse, my dog,
Everybody
talking
likes to
over there.
participate.
Yeah, everybody likes the dogs. But that's a very, very, very underutilized tax credit. And you can take it once you engage in it for all of the open tax years, which is generally the current year and 3 prior years. And when you take the credit, the government will actually pay you interest on the money they offset on your tax credit, believe it or not. So it's a wage-based credit. And the way it generally works is there's a list of qualifying activities. And if you do those qualifying activities as a certain percentage of your overall wage, whatever that may be, whether you're a business owner or architect or whatever, we just look at the percentage of each person in a company. Let's say it's 2 architects, and we see what percentage that is. We throw them into a bucket of qualifying money or wages, add them all up, throw a 20% deduction, and depending on their tax rate, they can file for that credit. And again, this is a credit that you really need to use a specialist because it can become a red flag audit item, although we've never had one of those overturned ever. So it's a great credit. The government put that credit to help stimulate business, and there are activities such as making yourself more competitive. So let's say you're a small manufacturing company. I have a company that has maybe 25 employees, 30 employees. They have a payroll of about $1.4 million. And they metal fabricate, punch press, stainless steel fabrication. And yet, they're good for a check of $50,000 just from this, and it's free money, essentially. So there's another opportunity that's very, very little used. Now, one of the shining stars, though, Jay, is the work opportunity tax credit. Now, here's another one where large businesses take advantage of it because they have the staff to support these things. But this credit works for companies that even have just one hire in every other year. It's a self-liquidating investment. And essentially, the government wants to give you a dowry for hiring. I guess, I don't know if everybody knows what a dowry is. If you're a millennial, probably not. But, that's where your wife's father paid you to take her out of the house. Essentially, that's the way I look at it. So, but it's still somewhat popular in Asia. But I haven't heard of a dowry happening here. So the government is saying, look, we've got these people on our rolls and we're paying for them. Let's say veterans that are challenged, maybe PTSD or physical disabilities, people on food stamps, people who've been on extended unemployment that actually do want to work. There's so many categories. And actually, there are more than just the work opportunity tax credit, which we call WOTC. But those sort of define that pool. As a matter of fact, even ex-felons. I have a client in Corona that owns a machining operation, quite large. They do injection molding of parts, and they only hire ex-felons because they're great workers. They're trying to earn their way back into society. She pays them very well, and she really exploits that work opportunity tax credit. So that credit pays you a one-time fee, depending on the classification of person that you hire, of between $1,200 and $9,600. And where we found that that's very popular is with staffing companies. So if you own a small staffing company, and I have a couple of those kinds of clients, just sole, well, they're not sole proprietorships, they're small, tiny corporations of one or two people. They will hire people for temp to hire sort of basis. For instance, they're going to hire a programmer and they're going to keep them on their payroll, and the client is going to be able to try before they buy. Now, of course, they pay a premium, but they're not dealing with all the workers' comp and the unemployment insurance, all that kind of thing. And then let's say, so the employee only has to work for 3 or 4 months for the employer to be eligible to get that tax credit. So the staffing company, they will keep that person on their payroll for 3 or 4 months, and then they will negotiate it with the client and say, hey, this guy Jay Massey is really smart. He's a great programmer. We want to hire him. So let's just buy him out of the agreement, and then it's some percentage of the first year's wages. Well, what's beautiful about the tax credit is the eventual client who hires Jay Massey will also be eligible for that tax credit. So it's kind of double dipping, and it's an awesome way to make money. And even if you're only hiring 1 or 2 people in 1 or 2 years, you can potentially make some pretty good offset to your money. If you're, especially, let's say you're hiring a building manager, I can see this so perfectly. You hire an ex-vet, okay? Make great building managers. I would bet they have discipline. You say jump, they say how high, for the most part. And there you're talking about a $9,600 tax credit right there. So there's so many ways to leverage this, and it's so easy. We have actually created a system that's, excuse me for promoting our business at this moment, but we've actually created a system where you can pre-screen your applicants for the work opportunity tax credit before you ever get on the phone and call them in for an interview. We're the only group in the United States that has something like that. So, you put an ad for a building manager, if you don't happen to know one, in Craigslist or Monster or Indeed, you put the credentials, all that stuff, and you get this monstrous pile of resumes. And that's the normal process. And then you're going through them, and there's no way, maybe, no way, maybe. Mm-hmm. And the maybe pile is about 5 or 10% of the no way pile, right? And so what normally happens is someone's going to get on the phone, call those people in for an interview. Well, our system allows for the user, the client, to just plug 4 fields into a little software portal: name, address, phone number, and email address. Sends that client or that prospect the essentially a humanized form of the federal form that they fill out in 2 or 3 seconds. It comes back and says J. Massey, $9,600 immediately in their portal. So who are you going to interview first? Remember, all things were equal. You put them in the maybe pile. So you might start that way. So we can identify, and even if you don't want to play that game, we can let you know whether every person you hire is eligible for any tax credit. So that's one I think that applies to even a pet shop owner that hires somebody to clean the cages, or whatever. So we've got them from the very big to the very small.
Now, when I'm listening to you, I'm just going, I can't think of a business that this doesn't apply to. That's literally what's going through my head. It's like, this is literally everywhere. There is no, if you are in business, there's a opportunity, or there's something that the way to optimize the cash flow, for lack of a better way of putting it. And that sounds amazing. Now, I know there's a number of people who have listened this far, and they're probably like, man, there's probably an opportunity for me that I'm just not aware of, because you deal in the realm of what you don't know. I mean, we don't know what we don't know, but you know. And if we take the time to track you down, we probably could find something out. So what's going to be the best way for everybody to connect with you, figure out what's going on, maybe even schedule some sort of a consultation so that they know, so that they can be brought into the know of what's possible for their business?
Well, yes, and it's our pleasure. All of our assessments are very, very, very fast. I mean, we know the businesses. It's not. I don't think we run into a business that's particularly new to us, but they can go to our website, which is wefindhiddenmoney.com. Should be easy to remember. wefindhiddenmoney.com, and there are the little pop-up things that say, "Yeah, I want to find some hidden money," or whatever they say. And just throw your name and phone number, email address, whatever your preference is, and we'll reach out to you. And we can do this by Skype. We can do this by phone. I have clients, I would say, in pretty much every state in the union. And it would be great if I could, interface with them personally, but they're happy. And by the way, I do want to mention one last one, Jay, which is, I want to call it Vegas money. And I don't know why that escaped me, because this is opportunity money. Part of our company, part of our strategic alliance of these companies that make up our workflow, are experts at class action lawsuit settlements. And I should have thought of this when I talked about the Visa MasterCard thing. But this is an opportunity for businesses who buy anything, which they all do, to potentially capitalize on things that they bought that might be involved with a class action lawsuit. For instance, there is a lawsuit that will settle very soon. I think it's closed for new entries for the old CRT type televisions, the big ones with the tubes that took up your entire desk
and weighed 400 pounds. But yeah,
right. And it was for purchases of those CRTs between 1995 and 2007. So you have a 13-year period of which essentially you quite honestly don't need any physical documentation, because even the feds don't require you to hold receipts past 7 years. It might even be less now. So, you make your best estimate, and those return pretty well. I have a very small hotel operation in the state of Washington that just had a private version of that for the state of Washington. Some states don't participate in the national ones, but I had a client that rang my phone at least 6 times during a company conference call, and I'm thinking, what on earth is going on with her? So after the call, I reached back out to her and I said, "Oh my God, what's going on?" She said, "I've got these 3 checks. They add up to $58,000. Are they real?" And it was because she had three very small hotels, 33 rooms, 50 rooms, 32 rooms. And that was a very, very lucrative class action lawsuit. She actually went as far as, even though she knew me and she trusted me, she made me write her an email that said it was safe to cash those checks. So this is strictly Vegas money. You never know when it's going to come, but depending on what it is, I mean, they have these class action lawsuits for fresh milk, eggs, CRTs, flat screen monitors. That was a really huge one. One of my colleagues had a client that made, I think it was $4 million, owned a number of hotels, big hotels, lots of flat screens, optical disc drives, just on and on and on and on and on. And you never know. And if anybody's interested in partaking of this is totally contingency based. We take a percentage of what's retrieved, but the data collection is very, very simple. And it's just Vegas money. When you get those checks, you say, hey, Jay, here's some money. I just found this. Let's get on it.
Man, there seems to be an overwhelming amount of opportunity. I can't even imagine how you guys stay on top of it, but I'm glad that you do. And so as we wind down here, I got to ask this question because I'm curious to hear your answer. There's probably a number of people who are listening and who have listened this far and go, you know what? They've come to a point of decision and said, I'm going to give this entrepreneur thing a try. I can go out there and make some money. Neil's going to help me save it and get it back wherever it's there. I'm going to finally step over that line and make something happen. So what I need to do is to just do it. And maybe they're standing in front of what I like to call the superhero outfit store. They're ready to put on their tights and cape and make it happen. With that being said, oftentimes when we reach these points of decision, we are also confronted with, a companion in the form of a voice. And it's a voice that reminds us of what we can't do, how it didn't work last time. And come on, what Neil's talking about, that can't possibly happen for you. And for some people, they're even related to the voice. But today's going to be different. They're going to actually get it done, Neil, and they're going to do so in the next 24 to 48 hours. So my question to you is as follows. What would you suggest that they do?
Well, I'm just going to give you one of my favorite sayings, Jay. Rumination is your ruination.
I like
it. Is. In my life, I really appreciate the freedom to have some freedom, even though, like you, I work really hard, but I do it because I love it. And I think that moving away from something that's, let's say call it a steady paycheck is an important thing for people. But I don't think you ever really get to find yourself unless you get out there and see what you've got personally. And I think that most people who have the thought about finding out what they can do personally can do it. They just may not have the self-assuredness. And I'll say it again, rumination is ruination. Don't miss the opportunity when you have an opportunity like this. And being an entrepreneur is, I just think, a wonderful thing.
Agreed 100%. Let me be one of the first to thank you for your depth of knowledge of so many different businesses and the opportunities that are out there, and taking the time to come and share your knowledge, your insight, and your wisdom here with us today at the Cashflow Diary.
I appreciate the opportunity to talk to your folks.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you know what time it is. It's time for you to move at the speed of instruction. What does that mean? That means go to wefindhiddenmoney.com. Why? Because you know you want to find some hidden money. Go get it. It's right there in front of you. I'm sure there's something that you don't know that he can help you find, and that more importantly could begin to change your bottom line. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been fun talking to you today. I look forward to talking to you soon. Until next time.